Davis Webb and Nathan Scheelhaase have entered the chat. Should the Bills wait on Clint Kubiak? We're going to break down the latest regarding the Bills head coaching search today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Locked On Bills is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Well, folks, welcome in. The Bills have interviewed 2 new candidates for the open head coach position. Philip Rivers is out. Should they wait for Clint Kubiak? I also want to talk a little bit about those conference championship games and some thoughts that I have about the Bills after watching them. So let's do it. And let's start with the Bills interview with Davis Webb, which happened virtually on Monday. Who is Davis Webb? Well, he's 31 years old. He played his college football at Texas Tech and Cal. He was a quarterback. And then he was a third-round pick in 2017 by the Giants. And he played for the Giants as a rookie. Then he went to the Jets for a year. Then he was with the Bills from 2019 through 2021. And then he finished his career playing for the Giants in 2022. One note about him finishing his career with the Giants in 2022 is that the Bills offered Davis Webb their quarterback coach position prior to him opting to play one more season with the Giants. And so there's been a belief for a long time that Davis Webb has a bright future in coaching. So he does finish his playing career in 2022. And in 2023, the Broncos hire him to be their quarterback's coach. And Sean Payton had one conversation with Davis Webb and hired him. And so he spends 2 years as their quarterback's coach. And then last year, the one that just happened, 2025, he was promoted to passing game coordinator. And he's interviewed with the Raiders, Ravens, and Bills. He's definitely a guy that's on a fast track to a head coaching job. And he's a name that has been mentioned a lot, even by several of his teammates in the past, that say inevitably he's going to be a great head coach one day. And one of my good quarterback contacts, Tony Rasiopi, raves about Davis Webb and calls him the smartest football person he's ever been around and the best ever on the whiteboard. There's a lot of positive remarks that you can find about Davis Webb and his future and potential as a head coach in the NFL. So as we've done for every candidate, let's talk pros, let's talk cons. Well, the pros is that you have a young offensive-minded head coach that is highly regarded. And as I've said repeatedly, I'm very curious about these types of coaches, the Sean McVays, the Matt LaFleurs, the Kyle Shanahans, the Liam Cohens, the Dave Canales. And Davis Webb is also a former player. So you get like the Kevin O'Connell, bright young offensive mind mixed with a guy that was a quarterback in the league. And I think that's a nice little combination of things. I also like that for a guy that's very young, 31 years old, he's worked under Sean Payton. He's worked under Brian Daboll. He's worked with Cliff Kingsbury. There's some good influence that he's been around. Now, what are the cons? Well, he's only been a coach for 3 years. He's never been a play caller. Now, Sean Payton did have him calls in the preseason. And so, yes, you are definitely taking somebody that's pretty raw when it comes to coaching and asking him to come in and be the difference for your football team in deep postseason runs and the deepest postseason runs. There's also a part of me that is going to be curious about this type of coach, whether it's Davis Webb, Brian Daboll, Joe Brady. if it's a comfort hire, right? I think we all want evolution. We don't want comfort. We don't want just, hey, Josh Allen's tight with this person. They're a smart offensive mind. Hire him, right? I think you have to avoid that. Now, is there a chance that that's the best path? Sure. And I'm open to it. But you have to ask yourself that question, especially with Josh Allen's involvement in the process. Is this the right hire or is this a comfort hire? I think it can in some ways be both, but it can't just be a comfort hire. There's a lot that's been said about the relationship that Josh has with Davis Webb, how tight they are, and you want to make sure that this coach can step in and really push Josh and push this team and not just blend in, right? I think there needs to be a personality here. There needs to be some backbone with this guy. And as I've said repeatedly, I am not leaning in any direction. I'm talking about the pros. I'm talking about the cons. And no matter who they pick, there's going to be concerns about them. There is. No matter who it is, there's also going to be positives about all of them. I'm choosing to embrace the positives and root for it to work out regardless of who it is, because nobody's going to be right away. There's going to be no instant gratification on whether you like the hire or not. So you might as well just embrace the positives, be aware of the concerns, and root for it to work out. So Davis Webb gets an interview on Monday. Not the only coach that got an interview on Monday. So did Nathan Scheelhaase. He's interesting. We'll talk about him and if the Bills should wait on Clint Kubiak here next. So folks, be sure to stick with me. There's nothing like being in an NBA arena, the crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part has always been a little tricky. That's why Game Time has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs, with the fans. You can pull up the Game Time app. You can pick up an upcoming NBA game. You have tickets locked in within minutes. You're going to love being able to see all the prices up front. There's no surprise fees at checkout. Plus, being able to see the view from your seat before purchasing makes a decision-making process very easy. They have zone deals that are going to stand out. You can choose the section, and Game Time will pick the seats and save you some time. They have great last-minute options, and with NBA tickets showing up at solid prices, no matter when you look, everything's going to feel quicker, intuitive, and stress-free from start to finish when you purchase tickets with Game Time. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's code Locked On, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. And remember, it's gametime.co, not .com. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's a perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to final whistle. If you're a new customer, just bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, folks, welcome back. So Davis Webb interviews, and later on Monday, Nathan Scheelhaase interviewed for the Bills head coaching job. So who is this guy? 35 years old. Was a quarterback. He played college football at Illinois from 2009 to 2013. And then in 2015, he started to work for the Illinois football team in the operations department. And then he started coaching in 2016. In 2016 and 2017, he was an offensive assistant at Illinois. Then he goes to Iowa State and has a huge glow up. So 2018, he's a running backs coach at Iowa State. 2019 through 2020, he's the wide receivers coach at Iowa State. Then 2021 through 2022, he's the running backs coach, wide receiver coach, and run game coordinator. And then 2023, he was a quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator Then Sean McVay brings him to the Rams in 2024. And so in 2024 with the Rams, he's an offensive assistant and passing game specialist. And then this past year, he was the passing game coordinator. So only a couple of years of time in the NFL. What are the pros? Pretty similar stuff to what I said about Davis Webb. Young, offensive-minded, highly regarded. Sean McVay loves him. Matt Campbell at Iowa State loves him. You get the gist here. It's a young, bright offensive mind that's highly regarded, that's on the fast track to being a head coach, right? There's been several of these. We talked about Davis Webb. We talked about Grant Udinski. There's these guys, right? They're a bit of the flavor of the league right now. And so he fits that mold. What are the cons here? Well, he's only been in the NFL for 2 seasons. That's it. It's hard to believe he's seen enough. Now, there's other coaches that are young, but they have a lot more experience in the NFL. We just talked about Davis Webb. He's younger than Nate Scheelhaase. He's 31. Scheelhaase is 35. But between playing and coaching in the NFL, Davis Webb's been in the NFL for 8 years. Grant Udinski, who just turned 30, would be the youngest head coach in NFL history if he's hired. He's got 6 years in the NFL. You got 2 with Scheelhaase. That's it. And look, I'm not saying that it's too much inexperience, but that's so little that makes you say, really? Like, is that enough? There's a lot of comparisons to him in terms of demeanor and temperament to Marcus Freeman with Notre Dame. So he comes highly regarded. Very, very young when it comes to time in the NFL. Let me say this about these young coaches, because we're talking about Scheelhaase is 35, Udinski is 30, Webb is 31, Joe Brady's young. These are young dudes. And I've never coached in the NFL, but I've managed people for a long time. I have over 10 years in management that started when I was 22 years old. And I managed at various levels, including a good amount of that in upper management. And I managed a lot of different types of people, including people that were older than me, that were in their jobs and in positions and with the company for longer than me. And let me tell you what, those were the easiest ones to manage. The hard ones to manage were the younger people who would test you and make you hold them accountable. The seasoned folks, they were the easiest. They wanted to do a good job. They wanted to know what they were supposed to do. And if there was an issue, they wanted the opportunity to fix it. The people that wanted to be led and coached to advance in their career, those are my favorite people to work with. They were the easiest ones to point out, like, hey, not what we're looking for here. This needs to be better. The young ones were the challenge. They were way harder. So I just keep that in mind. And obviously everybody's going to be a little bit different. But the youth part here doesn't really turn me off that much. You'll have the question. They'll have to prove themselves. But everyone's going to have to prove themselves. You can look at all the experience that these guys do or do not have, and all that matters is who they're going to be as head coach of the Bills. So there's a lot. There's a lot, right? I think the Bills have now interviewed 8 candidates. And I don't know how much deeper the search goes. We'll talk about the Clint Kubiak piece here in just a second. But everyone's asking, what do you want, Joe? What are your preferences? Like, my preference is for the Bills to get it right. That's my preference. Phillip Rivers has withdrawn himself from consideration of being the Bills head coach at this current time. And my suspicion here is that Phillip Rivers was potentially a candidate to be the head coach, but maybe one that the Bills preferred to be on staff as maybe a quarterback's coach, maybe as an offensive coordinator. And so maybe there was a thought here from Phillip Rivers that his most likely path was to be an assistant coach. And let's just be honest about Phillip Rivers. He's got 10 kids. You think he's moving them from Alabama to Buffalo and missing the opportunity to coach his son's senior season to go be an assistant coach? I think that's probably a big ask, especially with I'm pretty sure he's the quarterback of this team. And they've had a really good glow up as a program. The last 2 years, they've lost to the same team in the playoffs, and they've had a really good record. And so I'm sure that there's some unfinished business for Philip Rivers and his son there at St. Michael Catholic in Alabama. So no Philip Rivers. Interesting idea. Always a little crazy, but interesting. He won't be the next head coach of the Bills. One thing that has a lot of conversation right now is the Clint Kubiak factor. Clint Kubiak's the offensive coordinator with Seattle, and he's really impressive. I like his football. I like what he's been around. He's been around the league for a while. He's still a young, bright offensive mind, but with a lot more experience than a lot of these people that we're talking about. And so the challenge with the Bills as it relates to Clint Kubiak is that they're not allowed to speak to him until after the Super Bowl. They can't even speak to him. Now, other teams can, because if you've had a virtual interview prior to now, then you could speak to them again during this bye week before the Super Bowl for coaches that are on Super Bowl teams. But because the Bills got a later start in their search for a head coach and didn't have a virtual with Kubiak earlier, they are unable to speak to him until after the Super Bowl. And the risk to me is not really as much in waiting, for the simple fact of time goes by and maybe it becomes more difficult to build your staff. What gives me a lot of encouragement about Kubiak's ability to fill out a staff if he is the choice for the Bills and they're not able to speak to him until, after the Super Bowl, is that he handles your offensive coordinator. Like, okay, great. Kubiak's the offensive coordinator. And he does have pretty deep roots in the NFL where I don't have that much concern of him being able to find the defensive coordinator. Here's the risk to me in waiting. It's not the time. It's and take this respectfully and understand that I'm only speculating. I'm not talking with sources here. I'm just telling you something that I'm speculating about. Clint Kubiak feels like a guy that maybe the Raiders are lasering in on. They've already interviewed him virtually. They're having a second interview this week. You heard Tom Brady cackling about the Seahawks offense during the conference championship game that he called on Fox. And not that there's not a strong argument for Buffalo being a better job than the Raiders, right? You get to coach Josh Allen with the Bills. But those are very different situations. You have a Bills team that's looking for a coach to push them over the hump. Expectations are super high. They don't have a ton of resources, right? Like, it's not, of course, Terry Pagula is going to give you the money that you need to improve whatever you need with the football operation, but they don't have like a ton of draft picks or a ton of cap space to really add that much to the team. And you step in with huge expectations. You go to the Raiders, they're going to pick number one. You're going to get Mendoza. You have some offensive pieces in place. You're going to have an opportunity to kind of build it, right, a little bit more with the Raiders. Like, maybe Vegas is a place where he'd prefer to live versus Buffalo. You have to align yourself with not just the organization, but the city and the dynamics, right? Is it the right place at the right time? I wonder about Kubiak, especially because he's probably down this road a little bit with the Raiders, has thought a lot about, just his fit there and how that's going to work and how that really works for him, maybe different than Buffalo. Just speculating, right? Just speculating, sharing ideas, sharing thoughts. That's all I'm doing here. So the risk there is that you wait and Kubiak says, you know what? I kind of feel like this Raiders job is a better idea for me right now. And now what do? You go back and interview somebody that you could have hired 2 weeks ago? I think there's a lot to consider there. A lot to consider. One other note here on this Bills head coaching search regarding Grant Udinski, who interviewed with the Bills a few days ago. He has withdrawn his name from the Browns search. And so for Udinski, one of two things is going to happen. He's going to be the Bills head coach, or he's going back to the Jaguars, and they've already given him a pay raise should he come back to Jacksonville. And so it feels like there's been some momentum from Udinski. I'm interested. I'd be curious. I'd be cool with it. But it feels like there's a little bit of momentum there. So we'll see where this all goes. Maybe by the end of the week, the Bills will have a new coach. Maybe they'll wait until after the Super Bowl. We'll see where it goes. But the candidate pool keeps growing, adding 2 more to the list. Well, I guess simultaneously, Phillip Rivers and Mike McDaniel are out. So I guess it's down to 6 that have been interviewed and are still in the running. So we'll obviously keep you posted every step of the way, but that's what we know as of now. All right, I want to spend a little time here to close this thing out talking about the conference championship games and not really tell you what happened. You watch the games. But some thoughts that I have regarding the Bills from watching those games. So we'll do that here next, folks. Be sure to stick with me.
Hey, it's Matt Derry from the Locked On Lions podcast. The people I love depend on me. If I'm gone, the financial responsibilities don't disappear. I didn't want my family figuring things out during the hardest moment of their lives. That's why I knew only one place to go. I chose life insurance through my friends at Ethos. Ethos makes getting life insurance fast and easy, 100% online. You can get a quote in seconds, apply in minutes, and get same-day coverage. There's no medical exam. You just answer a few simple health questions. You can get up to $3 million in coverage. Some policies are as low as $30 a month. I love the folks at Ethos. Protect your family with life insurance from Ethos now by going to ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. In as little as 10 minutes, you can get the free quote and up to $3 million in coverage at ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. That is ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Application times and rates may vary.
The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to stay locked into every moment than with Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app where it always feels good to be right. With football season coming down to its final stretch, now's the perfect time to close it out strong. Prize Picks makes watching the game even more exciting by letting you build simple lineups around player projections. No drafts, no waiting, just football action all the way through the playoffs. Prize Picks is incredibly easy to get started. You just pick 2 or more players and choose more or less on their projections. It makes watching games more engaging, especially during the playoffs and the big game. It's a great way to keep playing fantasy football even after season-long leagues are finished. You'll love the early payouts, which lets you cash out if a player gets hot to start. And it's cool to be able to mix stars from different teams and build lineups that fit how you watch the game. So check it out. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Locked On NFL for $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. All right. I did not enjoy those conference championship games at all, right? No fun for a Bills fan. The Patriots win in the AFC. Do I need to say anything else? With Stephon Diggs going to the Super Bowl, with Mac Hollins going to the Super Bowl. On the NFC, I'm happy for Seattle, but, well, I don't love that Sam Darnold is the first quarterback from the 2018 class to go to the Super Bowl. Of course, the group of quarterbacks that includes Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. Well, Sam Darnold's first on his 15. So, yeah, it wasn't super fun to see that all play out at all, right? And this Patriots team is hard to reconcile. They're very hard to reconcile. I give them a lot of credit. They've taken advantage of their opportunity. They've taken advantage of their path. But, boy, it'd be nice to have that path for once, right? Some things that I learned or came away thinking about as it relates to the Bills. The first thing is don't be afraid of roster turnover. I feel like I've had this conversation. I talked about the Chiefs several years ago, and I talked about how, they kind of focused on a few players, right? It's Kelsey, Mahomes, Chris Jones, and then they didn't really panic outside of those players, right? They would swap out pieces on their O-line, swap out linebackers, swap out DBs left and right. They never got too afraid of transitioning parts of their roster. And I know obviously this has been a bad year for them, but let's not forget that they went to they won 3 of the last 5 Super Bowls and played in, 5 of 6 or something crazy, some crazy run. So right now, obviously they're not super exciting, but they were obviously. And I look at Seattle in particular. And they have just flipped so much of that roster. I mean, they literally said goodbye, Geno Smith, goodbye, Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. We're going to roll with Sam Darnold and Jackson Smith and Jigba and sign Cooper Kupp, trade for Rashid Shaheed. They were not afraid of that. They had a one-year offensive coordinator in Ryan Grubb and said, nah, we're good. We'll go with Clint Kubiak. They had a lot of belief in their ability to kind of shake some things up and take it in a new direction. And only the second year for head coach Mike McDonald. So don't be afraid of it. Even with New England. New England is a team that spent the most of any team in free agency. And they had to overspend because they were a bad team. But they were able to bring in just the right pieces to help build this team. They weren't afraid to transition. Right? I think that's what's true generally. It's roster transition, coaching transition. Like, don't be afraid of it. If your key pieces are in place, don't be afraid of it. Don't fall so in love with your own. Don't fall so in love with what you know, the comfort when there's possibilities to upgrade and evolve. And I think that's very clearly what Seattle and New England have been about. Two teams that weren't in the playoffs last year. Now, Seattle was a good team. I think they won 10 games and missed. New England was a Week 18 win over the Bills with Joe Milton away from picking first in the draft. Won 4 games. The other thing that I really gleaned from this, especially the Patriots, mostly the Patriots, is that for all the debates that we have about the Bills and how good this roster was, and if it's a championship caliber roster, nobody's going to look at the Patriots roster and say, you know what, brimming with talent, superstars all over the place, truly a championship caliber roster. They have huge holes on their own line. Their receivers can be a lot better. Their edge rushers, not really a thing. Kind of underwhelming at safety and linebacker. There's holes all over the place. They're in the Super Bowl right now. And even when the news was initially announced that the Bills had moved on from Sean McDermott, it wasn't hard to understand that it's a reasonably good decision, right? Like you can look at the opportunities that he's had and say, you know what, we just can't do this again. You've had 7 playoff runs with Josh Allen, right? Mike Vrabel and Mike McDonald have had one with Drake May, 1 with Sam Darnold. That's it. 7 tries with Josh freaking Allen. And I would argue that all 7 of those teams were more talented than what the Patriots have right now. Now, did the Bills get a path that include the Chargers, the Texans, and the Broncos with a backup quarterback? No, they've never had that. I mean, Drake May hasn't had to do really anything in these playoffs. But they're playing in the Super Bowl. And so the inspiration that I have coming out of those games is don't be afraid of transition, whether that's coaching, whether that's players, roster. And that ultimately, Sean McDermott had his chance. Like, it sucks. It truly does. I wanted so bad for Sean McDermott to be the coach that got this done. But can you give him an 8th chance? I don't think you can. I think the risk in staying the course is arguably bigger than the risk in picking a new head coach. All right, folks, there you have it. We'll see what tomorrow brings, right? I mean, maybe there'll be more interviews. Maybe they'll hire a coach. We'll see where this goes. But whatever happens, we'll be talking about it right here on Locked On Bills daily all year. No matter if it's in season, out of season, June, July, we are here for you daily on Locked On Bills. So don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. And I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.